History Channel's Alone Season 11 in the Arctic Circle. It's going to be a good one. So, if you want to know everything that they won't tell you on TV and learn tips, tricks, and strategies on how you could survive in a situation like that in the Arctic Circle, this episode's for you. And you might even find out who the winner is before the season's over. So, let's jump into it. Hey, I'm Teimojin from Alone Season 9, and I'm a doctor, veteran, and survivalist, teaching you guys the medical side of survival and preparedness. And in these series, I'm going to go over each episode and things that are missed in the commentary and things that you might want to take note on because you might be able to see who the winner is before the season's done. So this year, season 11's in the Arctic Circle, and you can already tell that it is going to be a good one. This clip of someone shooting at a moose, it looks like it drops. So the arrow hits this, a nice broadside shot. This is probably maybe 14 to 20 feet away. Really good distance. And I think this person, whoever it is going to win. We also see signs that the hunting on this season, the food procurement is going to be huge. This looks like a storage for meat, kind of the same setup that we've seen in previous seasons with some kind of meat box. And we do have our Wolverines out and hungry. So these people are going to see wintertime. They are going to get large amounts of meat because to need a box like that at that size, I think that's the guy who gets the moose. And we see a carcass here being dragged from grizzly bear, and that's a huge thing. This season, there's just so much game sign, and there's so much B-roll footage right now of people getting different types of animals and the different types of predator that might cause problems for our season 11 contestants. And little tidbits here and there for possible medical issues, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So we got ice fishing, we got hares, we got huge pikes. And check out these locations. We're introduced to some of our first contestants of this season, Isaiah, and he is 36, game warden, military in search and rescue. So yeah, has some medical training there. It seems like he has some military training that can help him. And it sounds like he's a pretty good hunter too. We see him take down some animals, do some traps, do some bushcrafting skills. In regards to his setup for his kit, it looks like pretty much all the standard stuff. And given the footage that we've already seen in commercials and on episode 1, they're going to be able to hunt and fish quite a lot, including fishing with possibly trot lines, but definitely with nets. So it's super exciting. The one thing that I noticed that was a little different was his shovel, and he did sharpen both sides of the shovel. So that can be his splitting edge. And honestly, if he is bringing a saw, that's well worth it because if he plans on digging or making in-ground shelter, that's a huge plus. The one thing that I would have changed in my shelter or my process for shelter is I'd probably wait out another week or two to find just the most optimal shelter location where you're literally putting less than a lean-to on and it's done. And it's pretty much a frame that it's solid, has a huge land mass or heat mass that is able to heat you. And I think the biggest concern is the predators of this season. So there is that incentive, that nervousness that a lot of people are feeling, and I think a lot of you may be feeling. Let me know if you have a different strategy or a different inkling on what would you do if you knew that there were grizzlies, if you knew that there were wolves around, and there are literally encounters where grizzlies are snatching people underneath and within their actual tents, let alone a tarp setup that these contestants are facing. So what would you do different? But I think there is a huge incentive to set up a shelter. But one thing that I would have done is probably wait a little bit to find a good natural shelter to build off of. And one of the things that I love looking at, especially when predicting who's going to win, or at least who's going to push farther than we think they will push. And I think a lot of this has to do with motivations and urgencies for those motivations. A lot of the time, it might be the case where people are trying to prove themselves, trying to represent something, try to inspire, or try to get a life changing amount of money. And we see that Isaiah does have a reason, a really good reason, because he spent a lot of his salary going through IVF therapy with his wife to get his daughter. And one of the things that he mentioned over here is he wants his daughter to look at him as a hero. And I think when you have that value, that ideology, or that purpose that you're pushing towards, it's definitely an added benefit. And it's something that you need to really solidify before you go. And what I would recommend if you are training for or something hard or training for a loan, there are going to be segments where you're going to be challenged. Your whole reason for being there is going to be challenged at some point. So, knowing what to think or how to think at those little segments of low points or second guessing yourself is super important. So, it might be remembering that at the end of the day, we are doing this for this reason. It might be to change your family's life, to inspire your daughter for the future. It might be all different reasons, but in those low points, you have to have those at the tip of your tongue, being like, I am here for this reason. Because when you're starving, when you're cold, when you're scared, there is so much pervasive thoughts saying like, let's just push the button for some reason. And that is the big challenge of this game because there is an out button. And right at the bat, we see wolf sign and we see bear sign. And more scarily, Isaiah, since he tracks a lot of these animals, he says bear sign with cub signs as well. So very, very dangerous situation. And I think a lot of the people are feeling that pressure. So again, big, big red flag for attacks. And we do see some of the contestants um, have bear spray, have like horns on their belts. For grizzly attacks, that's pretty scary if that's all you have because one swipe from these like 600 plus pound animals is pretty damaging and just to be able to call out can be a challenge in and of itself. So really applaud these contestants for putting themselves in this situation and also thinking of what they need to do to maintain their safety. And we see Isaiah go through some form of drop shock where he is kind of second guessing his reason. You know, at first he says he wants to be the hero for his daughter. He wants to do this for his family and provide. But you can see how twisted things can get if in that moment of just silence. You know, you have so much time to think about things. And we see how that wording twists to am I really doing her justice and being there for her by not being there for her? And this is like week one. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves because this doesn't mean that he's going to tap next, but it is something to kind of watch from the psychological standpoint because we want to see how these people are evolving to kind of predict how well they will do and to kind of learn from that. One of the things that Isaiah does face medically is a nosebleed, and he was mentioning maybe it was something he ate, but you would have to eat a decent amount of it unless it was incredibly potent. There are elements in medicinal plants that have an aspirin compound to it. That's pretty common in some inner bark, and some plants have it. But you do need to eat quite a lot to be at a point where it causes your platelets. One factor in your kind of clotting setup inside your body to cause a spontaneous bleed. Likely the case, it might be a little bit of dry, and one of the most common things is kind of like dry weather, cold weather, and then digital trauma or picking your nose. So one of the things that you can do though is we see him kind of like let it drip in his nose. The main thing that you want to do for a nosebleed, because the majority of the ones are kind of like in the front, close to the midline of your nose. That's where a lot of the blood vessels are. You want to be leaning forward and pinching your nose, the soft part, not the hard part. The hard part doesn't isn't really helpful because you're not compressing any blood vessels by compressing the bone. You want to be compressing all the soft tissue, all those blood vessels onto that cartilage, and you want to be holding quite tight. Think about like pinching your older brother as hard as you can, and you're doing that on your nose for 10 minutes straight. So it's not pinching, checking, pinching, checking, 10 minutes straight, and you're leaning forward. What that does is it concentrates all those platelets there and it helps clot it better. So if you do it like that and you let it drip in the back of your throat, which is a common mistake, what happens is it goes to the back of your throat, you gag on it, or if it is a lot and it goes into your stomach, that can irritate it. Then you're sneezing, you're coughing, you're vomiting, and that pressure makes the bleeding worse. So you don't want to do that. And let's say if it continues to bleed after those 10 minutes, what you can do is you can get gauze, like cotton balls, roll it really tightly, or you can do wrapped gauze, roll it really tightly, put it in your nose, and then use that to continue to put the pressure in. Because eventually the pressure will stop the bleed. So in the emergency department, to add the pressure so you're not holding it forever, we can put some medications in that gauze and put it in and put a clamp on. But without medication, you can just use a decent amount of pressure. We put like basically gauze balloons in your nose and we just pump it up, and that puts enough pressure, and we see you in like 2 days or so to remove those. So that would not be a reason to tap, especially the majority of bleeds are in the front of your nose and not the back of your nose. And check out these locations. These guys are super, super lucky for the fishing regulations, the hunting regulations, and just like the amount of water that they have, and the access to this. We see like the people who have river plus a little pond next to them, amazing. Especially some of the swamplands for the ungulate or moose hunting. William, big heads up for this one. I think this one William's going to be pushing quite far. Number one, he's from Labrador. That's where last season was, and it is not an easy life growing up there. And it sounds like he's taken some hunting, trapping, and fishing experience from the indigenous people over there. Was raised in that life, hunts a bunch, and he's a commercial fisherman as well. And we just look at this image over here, and we see that his putting on. I think he probably put on like at least 20 pounds for this, so he does have some reserves. He's on the older side, but that can definitely work to his advantage because he's not pushing himself at a rate that's going to burn himself out really early. And he went with the classic axe, knife, saw. And I think one of the things that really sets him apart is he didn't bring a bow and arrow because he doesn't have experience in that. I think that was a good call. If you don't have experience on that, you're going to lose a lot of arrows. And if you are more comfortable in using other ways to get food, do that. So he has fishing line, hooks, paracord, and fishing net. And I think he's really going to double down on the fishing, and he might just make a bunch of fishing nets and then have a bunch of trot lines if that's allowed. And we'll see later in the season if people are allowed or are doing trot lines. And for his reason, it sounds like in whatever situation he is in right now, he wants to move into a smaller community so that his kids are being raised. Now, the one thing that I would say is it's always great to have a reason above yourself to do anything hard. The one thing that I think really will set people apart in how far they're willing to push is the urgency for it. Like for some people, it's like you need this money this year, right now, to do whatever you need to do next. And maybe moving can be delayed. So I'm not sure if that reason related to his family will be enough to push him incredibly far. But that's just one factor out of many. And we'll see how he does. His shelter location, I do like the fact that he's using some land masses and his having some structural support so that grizzly bears don't get to him. This is an adequate size. Does have a decent amount of room. We'll see some other people with different shelters, but again, like my shelter was enough for me, my bed, and then an area for to store wood. And even that, it was like a 9 foot by I think 9 foot by like 5 feet or 6 feet on the inside, and it could have been smaller. minus probably the fireplace. I think if I were to take the fireplace and the wood out of there and just make it like a living quarters slash sleeping quarters, we could have been smaller and had less work to do. And we see him get his fishing net in, and it basically pays off day one. He gets this huge, huge pike, and unfortunately, he does not um, kind of bring it to the shoreline and kind of holds it up, and it flaps, and then his out of like 20 pounds of meat and fat. So that could have sustained him for like a few days comfortably, you know. And for someone who's like smaller like myself, like that could have been like a week's of food, you know. um Typically with the pike and the fish, you're getting a lot of omega 3s, you're getting a lot of fats. One of the things that I would do, because his main thing is he wanted food immediately, he wanted to put the net in and then get food. One of the things that a lot of people who lose fish on a loan is they typically build a net afterwards, so that they can kind of use it as a landing net. A quick alternative to that is, you can just make like a hook or something like that, or a stabby skewer or something like that, so that as soon as you see the fish, you can hook them in, get it on your kind of hook and onto the ground, because that is such a huge resource to lose. And one of the things that you can do for trees is that typically there will be some trees that kind of hook out like this, and in those trees, it's almost like a V notch. And in those V notch, if you have something that's like finger thick, all you really need to do on that V notch is have it maybe out a few inches, maybe 3 or 4 inches, and then have like almost like a arrow tip with a jagged kind of arrow tip on it. And all you have to do with that is just like stab and hook, and then you have that fish. Alternatively, one thing that I saw from one of our alternates on, I think it was Alone Frozen, he had a fishnet base layer. And that's something that if I were to do it again, I'd probably use as a base layer, because number one, you it wicks moisture a lot faster and you can cool down a lot faster. But the wick itself, if you look at the wick shirts, it does, if you get the right ones, it does have some thickness to it, and because there's air pockets that kind of elevate or space between your skin and the next layer, it actually is warmer if you use it as a base layer combined with other layers. So that's something that I currently use right now. I use it to train with in my jujitsu gi, and I also will be bringing it to Alaska for my next hunt. So that fish net kind of base layer can double as a landing net if you need to, for a really quick landing. So that kind of foregoes spending time to make kind of a landing net. And we see him eat some rose hips, some natural plant-based things. And just to give you an example, a lot of these things is he's saying that to spit out the seeds because they can cause some itchy bums, which is I common. But one of the things that you guys got to realize is when people are working on their shelter, they're burning upwards of like 2,000 calories. Where we're about like 40 degrees Fahrenheit in a lot of these scenes over here, especially like overnight and in the day. So it's getting to a place where it's getting a little frosty in the morning, or at least a little chill to the bone in the morning. So you are losing a decent amount of calories over here. Luckily, it's not. It hasn't looked super wet, but you are losing a decent amount of calories. So these berries or rose hips and anything else that they're taking, like they should be eating quite a bit, because just like a handful of it is like less than 120 kilocalories. So you really need to be eating a decent amount to maintain your energy and to kind of fight that weight loss, because you are losing about a pound, pound and a half. One of the coolest things that I see William do is he explores his property. He sees like this shallow river body, maybe just like a little inlet coming in, and then he identifies smelts. These are tiny little fish, and I don't think I've seen this yet on Alone, but he basically whacks the water, and that sonic shock stuns the fish, and he just grabs it. I think that's like the one of the coolest ways that someone has fished on alone. So I'm really, really curious to see what else he does because I think he's really going to double down on fishing. So this is a guy to look out for the types of stuff he does. And if his allow baiting fish in his nets and that type of thing, you just put some guts in your nets. I'm really curious to see how much food he gets with that. Let me know if these reviews are helpful for you. Let me know if you have questions about these episodes as well. And if you are learning and wanting to learn more about the medical side of survival, check out our new course, our new program at survivenow.online/lifeline. So I'll see you guys there, and we'll post some videos that might help you with other things related to survival.